What is the construction industry getting wrong that nobody wants to talk about? And how can we fix it? How is AI changing the face of how we interact on site and deliver projects? These are just some of the questions that we go through and speak to Lorne McClurg, Director of Moto Projects, in our discussion today. Lorne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good to be here.
So I'm going to jump in. I want to talk a bit about your career first, if we can. You've had a very remarkable career. You've worked at big firms through to founding your own practice. Take us through the journey and what led you to kick off Moto Projects.
I guess I was born and raised in a property industry family, so been around the sector for most of my life. Spent a bit of time away from and fighting the familial pull, but eventually ended up into a career in project management. Initially not in construction, but in education and training projects and corporate development projects. And that evolved into construction and worked my way through various private organisations delivering capital works projects, and found myself as a regional manager for a large multi-listed entity, at which time I realised I wasn't delivering projects anymore. I was delivering HR solutions more often than not, and that wasn't much fun. I kind of like being outside and kicking dirt and talking to consultants and problem solving, which is kind of what we do. And I wasn't doing that anymore. So I left the big multinational and started out on my own, and fairly quickly joined forces with my now business partner and formed Moto Projects because 1 + 1 can equal 3 rather than 1 equaling 1. We've been together now for nearly 15 years and growing the business. It's been good fun. We've got 10 people in the organisation. We work in South Australia predominantly. Every now and then venture to fields further apart at the request of key clients. But I'm really getting back to projects and working with people, working with organisations that want to deliver well. And I often say to my staff, why do we do what we do? And we do what we do because we enjoy working with the people in the industry, and I like the construction industry type people. They're my kind of vibe. So it's always good fun.
Yeah, I think it is really important to be able to work with people that you get along with and that you do find inspiring and you enjoy working with each day. So that makes a lot of sense why you did go down this path. So you're very well regarded for your clear view on what the client side project manager role is. How do you describe it to someone who has never worked with a PM before?
Usually in a somewhat derogatory way. We herd cats. Client-side project managers, really, our role is to help people solve problems, help people remain on track to deliver the promises they made to other people. We don't have a technical role as such. We have a contractual role in many cases. So we have to have a good understanding of contracts in the English language. But by and large, we have a people-focused role. It's about, helping people get what they need done when they need to do it and supporting them in jumping hurdles that they will no doubt encounter as they go through that process. It's making sure that people honour their promises and giving them tools to help them do that.
Oh, I love that. I love that honouring the promises, because it is so important that we can do that every day. So I want to talk a bit about risk and responsibility. So buildability, tender risk, design responsibility. These are themes you have significant expertise in. How do you know when designs are fit for purpose or incomplete when end users are so busy in their day-to-day?
It's a complex one, and I don't think there's a one-stop answer for that question in reality. Project management role, the client-side project manager by default should not be a technician. Our job is not to get down into the weeds of the technicality, because in bogging ourselves down in the weeds, we lose perspective, we lose objectivity. So our job is to help facilitate the experts get their job done correctly. And we rely on the experts to do a good job and produce the outcome that the client has requested. Now, what's the best test for whether they're doing that? It's getting them to explain what their documents are showing, but explain it in plain English. The world has become too full of jargon, and the construction industry and design sectors are no different. And our clients don't come from those sectors typically, and they will stare blankly and not understand. Our job as the project manager is to help them understand by being a translator, but it's also to help the design teams and the other professionals be able to explain stuff in plain English. And if they can explain it clearly and easily in plain English, then we're probably more on the track of being able to deliver what the client wants, because the client can go, I understand that. And no, that's not what I mean. This is what I mean. And we can test it up front. It's the old measure twice, cut once scenario. Work at the front end means down the back end is easier. So, do we hit, buildability, design risk, construction risk, tendering risk? They're just hurdles that we've got to jump over through the life of a project. The reality of the industry today is that, head contractors, they don't know how to build. They know how to administer trade contracts and manage a program to get trades on site. They don't actually know how to build much anymore. The days of the qualified tradie working his way through to become a site manager are disappearing fast. They're kids that come out of uni knowing how to administer, who then go into builders' roles as project managers, etc. And trades don't know how to build. They know how to assemble. They're very reliant on getting really good quality documents to know how to put something together. And if that detail is lacking, they'll go, oh, we need the detail. And then we got the designers. Designers, they know how to design. They don't know how to document anymore. I'm very much a Gen Xer / product of the boomer era. There's a lack of detail that used to exist in design, and a lack of education at the front end of people's careers to teach them how to do detailing. So it vanishes. So we've got this black hole in the industry, which is where the old school crusty guys on site used to be able to work things out with the trades and have a banter with the architect or the engineer to solve a problem. The skill sets that did that don't exist anymore. Those people have retired or died. And there's really no mechanism that's bringing that skill set back into the industry. So, we're always going to be suffering the risks of things not being easy to build, having to solve problems while we're constructing, having to deal with cost pressures past the tendering phase because people didn't interpret and understand, what was required properly. We're going to deal with designers whose, PI doesn't really, and their expertise doesn't really cover the detail that's necessary to give to a tradie who needs to assemble a product. So all of these things are just a natural now function of our industry. I'm not sure, I don't have a solution to, changing that, but, our job as the project manager is to help people get through that space. Yeah, so, can the participants in a project clearly and unambiguously explain to a client how their needs are going to be met really determines whether they've got it right or not. And if they can clearly and unambiguously explain that, and everyone can sit there and go, I understand exactly what's, and that's exactly what I need, then most of the problems are easier to solve. It's not easy to solve when people don't really understand what they're getting or don't really share the same picture with other participants. And that really is a project manager's job. Our job is to align everyone's expectations. If I describe a project to a group of people, pretty much everyone in the room will have a different picture in their head of what that project's going to look like at the end. Our job as a project manager is to make sure that that picture becomes the same picture. And then managing through the course of the project, because we'll hit hurdles, we'll hit road bumps, we'll hit changes, is make sure that we're constantly adapting that picture so that at the end of the day, everyone stands back and goes, oh, that's exactly what we thought we were building, exactly what I thought I was going to get. Could be completely different to the image that was in their head at the start of the job. But at the end, everyone's got what they thought they were going to get. That's a successful job. So, and that's our job as project managers. We don't create the picture, we just manage other people's view of that picture to make sure it's the same.
And so you mentioned there that the shift in, I guess, the emerging professionals coming through are not necessarily having the same band, the same relationships, the same conversations on site that you used to see happen. How are you managing that now as a project manager? How have you had to change your role compared to how it was, let's say, 10, 20 years ago?
Get grumpier. That goes with losing my hair. I think it's encouraging people to actually have a conversation, actually rock up on site and look at stuff. And there's a whole heap of factors that play into their ability to do that. Have they got the fee? Are they located in the right spot to be able to do that? have they got the technical expertise to be able to engage in the conversation and solve problems? Have they got the responsibility, authority, and accountability to be able to make decisions and provide direction? There's a whole heap of factors in play, but again, I get a bit old school, and I tell my guys to get old school is get people around a table in front of the problem. This push and, COVID accelerated a push to online. It's like, well, that's great, but no one's looking and pointing and touching at the same thing at the same time. And there's barriers in some of the more preferred ways of communicating these days that don't give a full picture and don't allow people to collaborate as they might have in the old days to solve problems. I'm sounding like a bit of a dinosaur, but, construction hasn't changed for thousands of years. Some of the products we use in construction have changed, but the actual process of construction hasn't changed for thousands of years. We start with the ground and we work our way up. We actually dig in the ground and then we work our way up. That's universally how it's been done for thousands of years. So we go back to some fundamentals. What worked for thousands of years and has only changed in the last 10 to 20 and introduced a new swathe of problems for us to solve. So, trying to make sure that people get back to basics, which is one-on-one communication around a table, looking at the problem, solving it together. That's kind of how we work through that.
So let's talk a bit about governance. So another big topic. So what does good project governance look like? And what are some of the early warning signs that something's starting to break down?
Good governance, in my book, is, it's all about communication. Communication needs to be, transparent, timely, easily understood, and backed up by the ability for people to take responsibility and have accountability and provide direction and decisions. So if you've got good communication and good decision-making matrix, that leads to good governance. How does a project progress well? People make good decisions at the right time in order to get through the hurdles that we encounter in projects. Projects will run smoothly if there's no problem, but that's not the real world. There's always going to be problems. So good governance makes sure that you can get through those problems as effectively and efficiently as possible. And that all comes down to comms. Comms and responsibility, taking responsibility. A lot of problems we see in governance occur when it's not clear who has the responsibility and who is accountable for making a decision. Particularly with larger organisations, public sector projects are notorious for it. Too many cooks and not enough chefs, or whatever the analogy you want to use. Too many fingers in the pie. We need, it needs a really clear matrix of who is responsible, who is making decisions, and who is taking accountability for getting that through that problem. Governance breaks down when people aren't being listened to, aren't being given decisions and direction, and retreat into their corners. The construction industry is notoriously adversarial, usually around money. Ultimately, most of our issues in the construction industry relate to money. It's often referred to as the root of all evil, which kind of is. If people aren't making a buck, it becomes hard. So, a good governance framework in place with a team where everyone is making a quid and everyone respects the fact that everyone needs to make a quid, they tend to go pretty well. Where one of those things falls down, where trust is eroded because decisions aren't done in the best interest of the project, they're done in the best interest of a participant. We have breakdown in trust issues, which then leads to breakdown in communication, which then leads to poor decision-making or unwieldy, untimely decision-making.
Is it always about cost, or sometimes is it about time?
They're one in the same. Construction projects, time is money. If you're slow in making a decision, every day counts. Now, whether it's at the front end before a contractor's even engaged, if you're a client is slow in making a decision about, selecting tiles, and an architect has to keep running back and forward to chase the client, the architect's burning fee, because architects and engineers and project managers, we sell time. So if things aren't moving quickly, we're losing money. Or we put our hand out to the client who goes, "Oh, why are you wanting to charge me money?" So, it's because you're taking too long to make a decision. Time always comes back to money. If money's no object, then time can do whatever it likes. But money is always an object. So time becomes an object too.
Very good. So I want to talk a bit about some work that you've done. You, for many years, sat on the board of the Pulteney Grammar School. So for 6 years, was it 6 years you were chair of
the board of the Capital Works, yeah.
Of the Capital Works subcommittee. Okay, so I'll just start that again. Okay, so you spent many years on the board of Pulteney Grammar School, 6 as chair of their Capital Works subcommittee. What did that experience teach you about delivering capital works inside an organisation that does not do it every day?
It was interesting because it very much fed into my day job anyhow, as in that role. Our day job is dealing with clients whose day job is not construction and development projects, and that's the same at schools. Schools are educational facilities, but my work with an independent schools are businesses like most of our clients. And, their business is educating kids, and they have a management structure that puts in place business managers and, directors of capital works and whatnot, staff within the organisation that's job is to deliver that. And fortunately, most of the independent schools, Pulteney being no exception, has good business managers who have an understanding of that process, usually have the authority to be able to action and move projects forward. That's done under the direction of a committee like I was chair of, which, ultimately reports to the board which I was on, to help make sure that what they're delivering meets the master plan, vision of the school. Good business managers know that they're not project managers, and they engage the services of independent project managers, for anything that's a significant project, to help them make sure that they can get on with their day job of managing the business affairs of the school, but that someone who's more attuned and more experienced is managing the risks of delivering a capital works project. So, I was lucky we had good business managers through my time at the school who understood all of that process, got the right technical and expert support when we were doing capital works. People like myself who were on the committees are able to help ask questions of the business managers, who can then ask questions of their experts to get a really clear understanding of who's doing what, when and where, and how we need to make decisions to keep the projects moving.
So just sort of continuing down this line a little bit, schools, not-for-profits, government agencies, they all face similar challenges in that they might be undertaking significant capital programs, but they don't necessarily have the construction expertise in-house. So why do you think it's so critical to have external advisory able to support those organisations?
It's so they can get on with their day job. At the end of the day, usually the school employees and executive, their primary focus is running a school, much like the primary focus of a banker is running a bank. It's not building a building. So good leaders, good managers, good executives know what they don't know as much as they know what they do. And they make sure they outsource what they don't know to people who do know. So my experience working with multiple independent schools in our business, as well as my time at Pulteney, was very much working with people who knew when they needed to get expert external help, because that freed them up to do their day job. And the day job is what pays for the capital works. Start trying to blend two roles into one, something's got to give. Something won't be done well when you're trying to do two things at once. Particularly if you're like me and prefer to do one thing at a time. But I think the good organisations, government, local government, they know when their skill sets aren't sufficient enough to challenge and tackle and overcome the hurdles that their projects are going to face. They need to get experts. It's why I don't play AFL footy. I know I can't play AFL footy.
Look, I think there's a lot of value in. I think there is a lot of value in doing one thing well at a time. So I think that does make sense. All right, so let's have a bit of a shift. We're going to talk a bit about software now, if that's okay. So there is no shortage of construction software on the market. What should a project owner or client-side PM actually look for? And what have you seen work in practice?
Oh, this is the loaded gun.
I've been waiting for this one.
Yeah, I'm a cynic who's been forced to use project management software. yeah, again, harking back to sort of old school ways of doing things, I think there's a lot of people hide behind software and hide behind what it supposedly does or doesn't do to avoid having conversations and avoid having to really understand the project and the role they're undertaking within that project. There is no end of software. I mean, we've had software vendors come at us left, right and centre over the years, and I think I'm currently registered on at least 4 different software platforms for different projects I'm working on. And they're all a nightmare, to be honest. You know, they all do some things really well and they all do other things really. And can I say they add any value to my life and my role? Probably not. You know, we pretty much all universally have to use Microsoft's suite of stuff, you know, Outlook and Excel and Word and all those things. Microsoft don't do project management software. They do a MS Project, which is a Gantt charting fluff tool, but they don't do project management software. So there's all these other platforms have sprung up, but you still got to come back and use Microsoft to put inputs into those project management platforms, which is always another bugbear of mine. But yeah, and the software all comes at different viewpoints depending on your role within a project. So some projects work really well with certain platforms because the projects are very much focused on, or the phase that those software programs come in is very much builder's focus. And the builder's focus is different to a design team's focus and different to a project manager's focus. I don't think there's one platform that does everything, which makes it hard because a project will go through a life cycle of, you know, concept, design, documentation, approvals, tendering, and then a contractor comes on board and then it goes through subcontracting and construction. They're 2 quite different things that require different tools. And I've not found a software package that does either one of those 2 different pre-construction, construction equally well, you know, and they're expensive, you know. The reality is the vast majority of projects delivered in Australia are delivered to feasibilities, and feasibilities rely on minimising the amount of cost and maximising the amount of return. So if you're adding in tens of thousands of dollars worth of software, that it's debatable whether it's going to give you tens of thousands of dollars worth of extra efficiency. You have to ask, well, why am I doing it? Builders do it really well. They use it almost universally, because it's a really good risk management tool for all of the subcontractors that they're dealing with. They use it as a document transfer, document management more than anything else. But do we need to do it? You know, does the design team get a huge amount of value out of it? Well, I'm not sure. Really big, complex programs of projects, maybe. But, you know, individual standalone projects, not so sure that the value's there in it. And it comes with hooks that I don't necessarily like. So, yeah. Long way of answering that question. You know, what should PMs look for? Whatever the client and the builder need to use to keep the communication flowing, to keep the decision-making process efficient and effective. That's really all we need. And then be really firm around the rules on how people use it. Because most of the software packages, people carpet bomb, you know, use the old blunderbuss and throw out correspondence and documents to anyone and everyone. They've become a really good tool of filling inboxes full of crap that most people don't need to read. And it's just people covering their ass.
So if there was no project management software, I'm going a bit off script here, but if there was no project management software, what would your job look like? Like how would you do your job?
Yep, phone, type some emails. You know, I often say to most of my crew, 80% of what we do as project managers should come out of our mouth. 20% comes out of our fingertips. The fingertips really is just documenting to make sure we've got a contractual paper trail. The rest of it should come out of your mouth. So pick up the phone, people, you know, arrange face-to-face meetings. If you have to, use mediums like, you know, Teams to have somewhat face-to-face conversations. That's how people solve problems. The software doesn't solve the problem. Software, you know, just captures the solution that everyone agreed to deal with the problem. It's a tracking tool. It's a document management tool. We would be like we used to be, you know, back in the, you know, 80s, 90s, 2000s, picking up the phone, sending faxes, sending letters, you know, back to the old school ways that we've been doing for thousands of years before software was really invented. You know? And we've managed to build buildings just as well back then as we do now.
Probably would have had a big project on the wall behind you with all the Post-it notes and everything moving around, right?
I still do that, but I'm crusty and old, so.
Look, there there's something to be said for being able to tactically map everything in your brain. I do get it. So I want to talk a bit about what you're most excited about for the future with technology. So I'm interested to see how you answer this one. So technology is moving fast in the construction industry. What does excite you? And what do you think is more hype than reality?
Okay, so what excites me, because that's probably the less contentious bit. I'm excited about what the future of modular construction can do. The process of building is much the same, but it's done in a factory and then assembled on site, which means that, in theory, you do use less skilled labour in the factory that's supervised by skilled labour to turn things out quicker. You're not subject to rain like we've got out the window here. You can turn things out to a reasonably high quality and consistency, and then plonk it on site quick and move things forward. To date, I don't think we've found anywhere where modular is cheaper or necessarily that much quicker than traditional construction. It's just you've got a little bit more control over the quality of the assembly, and you might get a little bit of cost efficiency out of it, but it's marginal. I think the exciting thing for modular construction is the rise of the Chinese manufacturing base and the quality of the product and the technology that's being used there. They're moving ahead in leaps and bounds, and that does make speed of construction an item to have a good conversation around. Obviously, time being money. So as we get better modular outcomes and we get better supply chains of modular coming into Australia, I think that's an exciting opportunity, particularly to address things like our current housing shortage. It's going to require a bit of a change in appetite and a paradigm shift on what we're used to calling a home, for example. But we'll adapt. That's human nature. If we're presented with a good case, we'll adapt and take it up. So I think that I'm excited about that. I don't know that there's anything else that really gets me excited in construction. Construction is universally the same. A brick goes on top of a brick, a pipe goes in. I mean, we see, things like 3D printed buildings and all that kind of stuff. They're too slow. They're not efficient. There's limits on them. It's early days with them. So, there's lots of things that get talked about, but the root of it is still pretty much the same as we've been doing for thousands of years. So, there's nothing really in that space that excites me. I think in the AI is the buzz. Everyone's pushing AI. I think AI is a road to ruin because people are going to use it as the way of thinking, not to think themselves. And AI doesn't communicate at a human level, and it's not designed to as it currently stands. And there's so much of what we do in the construction and development industry relies on human communication and interpersonal relationships that if we become too dependent on it, we are going to have some big fallouts, not least of which is it will cost a load of money and tie us up and capture us and imprison us like Microsoft has, ultimately. And that's not necessarily of great benefit to any person to be imprisoned in the way they have to do things.
Yeah, so interesting. I want to ask you, if you were speaking to a graduate coming out of university about to start work and they aspire to have a career as you have, what skills do you think they could really focus on to make sure that they can perform the way you do in 10 years' time when AI's no doubt continued to progress and take some of the jobs that those administrative jobs and whatnot and maybe, as you say, change the way we communicate? What sort of skills would you say they should focus on?
Less scrolling, more talking. I've got teenage boys, and just the other day I was asking, can you call your brother and tell him that he needs to come home for dinner, kind of question. And my son picked up his phone and started texting. I'm like, what are you doing? Call him, speak to him. But it's like we're losing the ability to communicate with language and emotion and being able to understand and see the cues that are non-written. But I think young graduates learn to communicate and don't avoid it. There's this. It seems to me that there's this massive avoidance of face-to-face verbal communication coming through, graduates and, the younger generations. And again, sounding like an old boomer, not quite, but I am, that we're losing that interpersonal skill, and that's going to cause a heap of problems down the track, because it's the human connection that will resolve a really bad problem. A really big problem isn't solved by technology. A really big problem on a construction site is solved by a bunch of people getting together, having a conversation and mutually agreeing that this is the outcome, knowing that they're not necessarily going to get what they want in total. They're going to get some of what they want, and each person in there is only going to get some of what they want, but it will solve the problem. That only happens with an interpersonal relationship. It's not going to come out of your fingertips on a keyboard. AI isn't going to be able to deliver that outcome for you. So, youngsters today need to understand that they need to be able to talk to people, and they need to be able to listen to people and understand their viewpoint, assimilate the views of that individual has with other people's views, and find a way of collectively bargaining an outcome, resolving conflict. Those skill sets are becoming harder to teach, because all the teaching platforms are going to, or just look at this AI model, or just look at this online lecture, or, I think we've really got to get back to, how do we solve big problems? We solve big problems by working together, not by letting machines do it.
So I've got one more question. If you were speaking to a project owner sitting in the middle of a struggling program right now, what is the one thing that you would say they should do differently this week to impact change?
Don't worry about it. It will all work out in the end. We spend a lot of emotional energy worrying about a problem related to time. Time is something that we have an abundance of. Every day is more time. We don't have an abundance of money. We don't have an abundance of resources. So that's a function of time. But by getting too worried about stuff, we lose our objectivity. Don't worry about it. What you need to worry about is, or think about, more importantly, is, do I have everything in place that I need in place to make decisions? Do I have the information I need to make a decision? Start asking the questions. Am I a roadblock as a project owner? Am I a roadblock? Am I asking for stuff that I didn't tell people before? And if I am, get on and answer the questions that are being thrown at me. Have other people got problems that I'm not aware of that are slowing them down in their ability to do their job? And go and ask, hey, have you got a problem? It's the simple interpersonal thing. Hey, how are you doing? Have you got a problem that I can help you fix? Get back to communication, get back to that personal, what's your issue and how do we solve it? Sometimes there's going to be problems that can't be solved, and it's just going to take time to get through it. Like, we've got a major weather event. Okay, well, that's putting my program under pressure. Okay, well, can't do anything about that. But what can we do to plan ahead and fix the outcome at the other end of this event? How do I make sure that everyone's got the tools to be able to solve the problems that come from the problem we're currently dealing with that we can't influence? So, it's kind of take a chill pill. No projects, well, it's been some, but very few projects sit there idle forever. They eventually get through it, but they get through it by humans working together to solve the problem and move it forward. So as your project owner, what do you need to do? Make sure that you're not the problem. Have a really good look in the mirror. People struggle to do sometimes. Is there anything that I'm doing that's causing problems to other people? Tick, no, there isn't. Okay, well, what are problems that are other people facing that I might be able to help them solve? That's how you get through program constraints, and sometimes you just have to reset your expectation, because you know what? The problem isn't anyone's particular doing. It is just a problem. And that's why we have programs with contingency in them, because contingencies are there to help deal with program slips. And too many times these days, people strip out contingency in program. It's get it done faster, get it done tomorrow. It's like, yeah, but it's raining today. I can't do it tomorrow. I have to draw down on some contingency.
Look, Lorne, this has been a fabulous discussion, and I'm sure everyone who is able to watch this will gain a lot of insight from what you shared. You obviously have had many, many years of experience in how to manage projects, but most importantly, how to manage the people who are driving those projects. So I've really enjoyed this discussion. So thank you very much for all of your time today.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate the conversation.
Wonderful.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to know more about construction and get all the professional tips, tricks, and AI advice from real construction project managers, follow this channel for more insights.